At 63, I went to a clinic for chest pain, and a doctor locked the door, slipped a note into my purse, and whispered that I had to run from my own family. That same night, I found muddy footprints inside my house, my mother's letters missing, and I realized my blood had been owned long before I ever knew it. For Muslim viewers, please write your prayers in the comments for the character's intercession in the afterlife, and mention the city you are watching from. May your fortune be smooth, your health be good, and everything be made easy. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more powerful narratives. My name is Lorna May Coldwell. I am 63 years old, and I have spent most of my life being the woman who holds everyone together. I am the one who remembers birthdays, who brings food when someone is sick, who listens when people are ashamed to speak. In my family, that role was not given. It was taken slowly year by year until it became my skin. Briar Hollow is a small town that looks calm from the outside. The roads are narrow. The stores close early. People wave at you even if they do not like you. The air smells like pine and old wood. At night, the quiet feels heavy, like something sitting on your chest. That morning, my chest already felt that way. Started after breakfast. I was washing a plate when the pain hit, sharp enough to make me grip the counter. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was age. I told myself I would sit down and it would pass. Did not pass. I tried to breathe slowly, like I had taught my niece Naomi years ago when she had panic attacks in high school. In through the nose, out through the mouth. My hand shook anyway. The pain kept spreading like it wanted to reach my throat. I thought of Ruthie, my older sister. She would tell me to stop being dramatic. She would tell me to drink tea and pray and get back to work. Ruthie always acted like fear was a weakness. But I was alone in my kitchen, and the fear felt clean and simple. Felt like my body trying to warn me. I grabbed my keys and drove to Briar Hollow Clinic. The clinic is on the edge of town near the old mill, a pale building that always smells like disinfectant and tired people. The waiting room was almost empty. A young mother sat with a coughing child. An old man stared at the wall like he was counting invisible marks. I checked in, gave my name and sat down. My knees bounced. I kept my purse close, one hand on the strap like I needed to hold on to something real. A nurse called my name. She was friendly in a practiced way. Her badge said Marisol. She led me into a small room and wrapped a cuff around my arm. When the machine beeped, her smile changed. It did not disappear, just tightened. She checked it again. Then she looked at the monitor like she wished it would say something different. She asked me if I had a family history of heart issues. Said yes. My mother died young. My aunt too. My father was gone before I was old enough to understand what his absence meant. Marisol nodded, typed something, and told me the doctor would be in soon. I sat on the paper-covered bed and listened to the sounds outside the door. The step. Low voices. Phone ringing, then stopping suddenly. The doctor finally came in. He was a white man in his late 50s, tall, with thinning hair and a careful smile. His coat was clean. His hands were not steady. He introduced himself as Dr. Walsh. He did not sit at first. He looked at the chart, then looked at me, then looked back at the chart like he wanted to avoid my eyes. He asked me questions that sounded normal. Where did it hurt? When did it start? Did I feel dizzy? Did I feel short of breath? I answered all of them. Then he took my pulse, listened to my chest, and stared at the numbers on the screen longer than he needed to. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. He said my vitals were unusual. He said he wanted to run some blood tests and an electrocardiogram. He said it like it was routine, but he was breathing too fast, and his eyes kept flicking toward the door. Marisol returned to draw my blood. She avoided my face. The needle went in, the tube filled, and she left quickly like she was afraid of staying too long. Dr. Walsh asked me to wait. I watched the second hand on the wall clock move in slow steps. Each tick sounded louder than it should. 10 minutes later, he came back in and closed the door behind him. He did not just pull it shut. He turned the lock. I sat up straighter. My heart pain felt different now. Less physical, more personal. He stood between me and the door, then moved aside like he realized how that looked. He took a breath and said very carefully that my heart rhythm was not the main problem. I asked what he meant. He looked down at the chart, then at my purse on the chair. He walked closer, not too close, like he was afraid of crossing a line. He lowered his voice and said, "I cannot say this out loud." Then he asked me if anyone had come with me. I told him no. His eyes flashed with something like relief, then something like regret. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was folded twice. Plain. No letterhead. He did not hand it to me. He did not want it seen in my hand. Instead, he leaned toward my purse and slid the folded paper into the side pocket with 2 fingers, like he was touching something dangerous. He whispered, "Do not open it here." I stared at him, trying to read his face. His skin looked pale. His mouth was dry. He kept swallowing like his throat was closing. I asked him why he was doing this. He shook his head once, quick, like he was stopping himself from speaking. He unlocked the door. He opened it a little, checked the hallway, then closed it again. He looked at me and said, "Listen to me. Whatever you do, do not go home." My body went cold. I told him that I lived alone. I told him there was no one at my house. He said, "I know." That word hit me harder than the chest pain. I stood up slowly. The room felt smaller than it had a minute ago. The air felt like it had been used up. I asked him who was watching me. He did not answer that. He only said, "Get in your car, drive somewhere public, and call someone you trust. Do not call family first." I felt offended by that. Then I felt ashamed for feeling offended, because fear does not care about pride. Took my purse. My fingers touched the side pocket. The paper inside felt like a weight. Dr. Walsh stepped back, like he wanted distance from what he had just done. He told me that the clinic would call later with official results. Official. That word sounded fake in his mouth. I walked out of the room, past Marisol, who pretended to be busy with a clipboard. Her eyes met mine for a second, and in that second I saw apology. I left the building and stood in the parking lot. The sun was bright and everything looked normal. Cars. Trees. Quiet street. The world did not look like it had changed, but I felt like I had stepped into a different life. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys once before I could start the engine. I drove without thinking. I did not go home. I drove toward the center of town, toward places with people, toward light and noise. At a red light, I pulled the paper out of my purse. It had 4 words written in thick black ink. "Run from your family." My stomach turned. My throat tightened. I wanted to laugh because it sounded impossible. I wanted to cry because it sounded too specific to be a joke. I folded it back and shoved it into my wallet, deep behind my cards like I could hide it from myself. I sat there at the light while the cars behind me waited. Someone honked. I moved forward. Kept driving. I told myself I would go to Evelyn. Evelyn Brooks, my best friend since church choir days. The one person who never judged me for being tired. I told myself I would be fine if I stayed in public for a while. I circled back toward my neighborhood later. Not to go home, just to see. Just to prove the note was wrong. The street looked the same. My small house sat behind a short fence. The porch light was off. The curtains were still. No movement. Parked down the road and watched. Nothing happened for a full minute. Then I noticed something I could not explain. My front door was not fully closed. It was open, just a small crack, like someone had gone in and wanted it to look normal from a distance. I held my breath and stared until my eyes hurt. Then I saw the porch steps. There were muddy footprints leading up to the door. 2 sets. One larger. One smaller. And neither of them belonged to me. I did not get out of the car. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, watching my house like it might blink first. The porch light was still off. The door stayed cracked open, unmoving. The muddy footprints looked darker now, like they were drying into the wood. I told myself to call the police. I even picked up my phone. Then I stopped. Briar Hollow police knew everyone. They went to church with us. They married our cousins. They called our parents by their first names. If this had anything to do with my family, I did not want the town involved yet. Dr. Walsh had said not to call family first. Put the phone down. I drove away. I went straight to Evelyn's house. She lived near the old cemetery, in a small yellow place that always smelled like coffee and laundry soap. Her porch light was on. That alone made me feel like I could breathe again. When she opened the door and saw my face, she did not ask questions. She stepped aside and let me in. I sat at her kitchen table while she poured me water. My hands were still shaking. I could not stop them. I told her everything. Chest pain. Clinic. A doctor. A note. The open door. She listened without interrupting. Her mouth tightened the more I spoke. When I finished, she reached across the table and held my hand. She said, "You can stay here as long as you need." I nodded, grateful but not relieved. Fear does not disappear just because someone believes you. That night I did not sleep. Every sound felt sharp. Every creak of the house made my heart jump. I kept thinking about the note. Run from your family. Did not make sense. My family was not perfect, but they were not dangerous. Ruthie was strict, yes. Controlling, yes. But violent. Secretive enough to scare a doctor. Whoa. By morning, my chest pain had dulled into a constant ache. Check my phone. 3 missed calls from the clinic. No voicemail. I waited until Evelyn left the room, then I called back. Marisol answered. I recognized her voice immediately. She sounded surprised, then careful. She told me Dr. Walsh was not available. I asked for my test results. She paused too long. Then she said my blood work showed something unusual. She said it was genetic. She said it was rare. I asked her to explain. She lowered her voice, even though she was on the phone. She said certain markers in my blood suggested my body reacted differently to stress and medication. She said the pattern was something they usually saw across family lines, not individuals. I asked her why that mattered. She said it mattered because someone had flagged my name before the tests were even done. That made my skin prickle. I asked her who. She said she could not tell me. I asked her how long my name had been flagged. She said since before you walked in. The call ended shortly after that. She apologized. She sounded like she meant it. I sat there staring at my phone until the screen went dark. Someone had been watching me. Not just me. My blood. My family. I thought about my mother again. About how she used to complain of fatigue, dizziness, strange pains she never explained. About how she died suddenly one afternoon while folding laundry. They called it natural causes. They always do. I decided I needed answers from the one person who knew our family history better than anyone else. Ruthie. I drove to her house late morning. I told myself I would be calm. I told myself I would not accuse her of anything. I told myself I only wanted information. Her house was neat as always. White curtains. Perfect lawn. No dust on the porch. She opened the door already dressed for the day, like she had been expecting me. Her eyes went to my face, then my chest. She said, "You look tired." I stepped inside. I asked her if she remembered the year Mama got sick. She frowned. She said it was a long time ago. I asked her if Mama ever went to Briar Hollow Clinic. She stiffened. She said, "Why are you asking these questions now?" I told her about my visit. I told her about the blood tests. I did not tell her about the note. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She said doctors like to scare people. She said I was letting my imagination run wild. She said I should focus on prayer and rest. I asked her if anyone had ever asked her to sign medical papers for the family. Her face changed then. Just a little. Enough. She asked me who had put that idea in my head. I told her no one. She said I was being disrespectful. I asked her if she had ever signed anything for me. She did not answer. That silence told me more than words could. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but my mind felt sharp in a way it had not in years. I told her someone had been in my house. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She said, "You should not be stirring old things." I asked her what old things. She stood too quickly. She walked to the window and looked outside like she was checking for someone. She told me to drop this. She told me to go home and lock my doors. She told me to trust family. I thought of the note in my wallet. I left without arguing. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. Text from Naomi. Said, "Aunt Lorna, I think something is wrong. Can we talk?" I pulled over and called her immediately. Rang. Then it went to voicemail. Called again. Nothing. A cold fear settled in my chest, deeper than the pain. I drove to Naomi's apartment. Her car was there. Her lights were off. Her phone kept ringing unanswered inside. I noticed her mailbox. It was open. Papers were scattered on the ground. One envelope caught my eye. It was from Briar Hollow Clinic. Addressed to Naomi Caldwell. Dated 2 years ago. My hands shook as I picked it up. This was not new. This had been happening for a long time. And my family had known. I did not take the envelope inside Naomi's apartment. I stood in the parking lot, holding it like it might burn my skin. 2 years ago. That date kept repeating in my head. Naomi had been living in Briar Hollow for 5 years. 2 years ago was when she started changing. She stopped coming to family dinners. She asked strange questions. She started keeping records on her laptop, always closing it when someone walked in. We had called her paranoid. I folded the envelope and put it in my purse. I drove back to Evelyn's house without telling Naomi I had been there. I did not know who I could trust anymore, and that thought hurt more than anything else. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on, staring at her laptop. She looked up when I came in. She said, "I was just about to call you." She turned the screen toward me. And it was a scanned document. Yellowed. The text was faint but readable. It was a consent form. The names at the bottom made my throat close. My mother. My aunt. And Ruthie. I leaned closer. The form mentioned a private health initiative. Long-term monitoring. Genetic markers. Confidentiality agreements. Financial compensation. The date was from more than 40 years ago. I asked Evelyn how she found it. She told me she remembered something from church archives. Back when she helped organize old records. She said she searched names out of curiosity after hearing my story. The document had been hidden under a generic folder name. Felt sick. This was not random. This was not recent. This was a system. I thought about the women in our family who had died early, who had complained of the same symptoms, who had been told not to worry. I asked Evelyn if the form mentioned children. She scrolled. Did. It said future generations would be included automatically unless they opted out. Did out. How could we opt out of something we never knew existed? I felt anger rise in me, slow and heavy. Called Naomi again. This time she answered. Her voice was low. She sounded tired. She told me she was not at home. She told me she had been followed earlier. She told me she was scared. I asked her where she was. She said she could not say. She said, "Aunt Lorna, they have been doing this to us for years." I told her I knew. She went quiet. Then she said, "I tried to tell you. All of you." Nobody wanted to hear it. I told her to stay where she was and keep her phone on. The call ended suddenly. No goodbye. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. Did not. That night, Evelyn and I went through everything. Old obituaries, medical records, church notes. Patterns started forming like lines on a map. Same clinic, same foundation name, same explanations. Natural causes, complications, sudden decline. Always women, always black, always connected to families who never left Briar Hollow. I felt ashamed of how long it took me to see it. I thought of Ruthie again, of her tight control, of her refusal to talk about the past. She had not just been protecting us from fear. She had been protecting an agreement. In the early morning there was a knock at the door. Evelyn froze. I stood up slowly. I looked through the peephole. It was a man I did not recognize. He wore a jacket with a logo I had never noticed before. The same logo from the consent form. A circle with a tree inside. My heart pounded. He knocked again. Louder. Evelyn whispered, "Do not open it." I agreed. The man waited. Then he slid something under the door. Footsteps moved away. Picked it up. It was a brochure. Clean. Talked about community wellness, heritage health programs, generational care. At the bottom was a phone number. I realized then that they were not hiding anymore. They knew I was asking questions, and they were ready to remind me who held the power. The brochure stayed on the kitchen table all morning like a quiet threat. Evelyn made coffee neither of us drank. We sat across from each other, listening to the house settle, waiting for another knock that did not come. I kept thinking about Naomi. Every time my phone stayed silent, my chest tightened. I sent her short messages. Just one line. Just to let her know I was still here. No replies came back. Around noon, I decided waiting was worse than moving. I told Evelyn I needed to see the clinic records myself. Not the public ones. The archived ones. She hesitated. Then she nodded. Briar Hollow Clinic had been renovated twice over the years, but the basement stayed the same. Old buildings never fully let go of their past. Evelyn knew this because her cousin used to work maintenance there. She made a call. Quiet. Careful. By late afternoon we were inside. The clinic smelled different after hours. Less disinfectant. More dust. The lights flickered like they did not want to be awake. We went down a narrow staircase into the basement. Shelves lined the walls, packed with boxes and binders. Some were labeled clearly. Others were marked with numbers only. Evelyn knew where to start. She said older records were always pushed to the back. My hand shook as I opened the first box. Names stared back at me. Notes written in careful handwriting. Every few pages I saw something familiar. Coldwell. I swallowed hard and kept going. The records did not just track illness. They tracked behavior, compliance, emotional state, family dynamics. One note described my mother as cooperative. Another described my aunt as resistant. Both were followed by the same word. Resolved. Felt cold. Checked the dates. The notes stopped shortly before their deaths. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear everything apart. Instead, I took photos with my phone. Every page, every name, every symbol. Evelyn stood watch near the stairs. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. That steadiness kept me upright. We were almost done when we heard voices upstairs. Froze. Evelyn motioned for silence. Footsteps moved across the floor above us. A door opened. Someone laughed softly. Then silence again. We waited until my legs ached. When we finally left, the sky outside had turned orange. The day felt too normal for what I had just learned. Back at Evelyn's house, my phone buzzed. A message from Naomi. Said I found proof too. They are not just watching. They are adjusting. My hands trembled as I typed back. Before I could send it, another message came in. Unknown number. Said this does not have to be difficult. Hope and fear collided inside me. For the first time I realized something important. They were nervous. And that meant we had leverage. The message stayed on my screen for a long time. This does not have to be difficult. I did not reply. I turned my phone face down on the table like I could silence the world with that small act. Evelyn watched me closely. She asked who it was. I told her the truth. Not a name. Not yet. Just that someone knew I was getting closer. She did not tell me to stop. She did not tell me to be careful. She said, then we move faster. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those clinic notes. Cooperative. Resistant. Resolved. I kept thinking about what resolved really meant. I kept hearing Naomi's voice in my head. They are adjusting. By morning the town felt different. The same streets. The same faces. But now I noticed how often people watched instead of waved. How often conversations stopped when I passed. I went back to my house for the first time since the clinic. I did not tell Evelyn where I was going. I did not want her following me into danger. The front door was closed now. The lock looked untouched. From the outside nothing was wrong. Inside the air felt stale. I walked through each room slowly. Nothing was broken. Nothing obvious was missing. Then I went to my bedroom. The drawer where I kept old letters was open. My heart sank. Inside that drawer had been photographs, handwritten notes, a small envelope from my mother that Ruthie once told me never to open. I had kept it for decades, waiting for the right time. The envelope was gone. So were the photographs. Only the letters I had written myself were left behind. That told me everything. They did not want memories. They wanted evidence. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt something drop inside me. Not fear. Not sadness. Clarity. This was not about protecting my health. This was about controlling a story. I left the house and drove straight to Ruthie's. She opened the door without surprise. She looked tired. Older than she had 2 days ago. I asked her where my mother's letter was. She tried to deny it. Then she stopped. She told me she had been trying to keep me safe. She told me the agreement had protected us. She told me money had paid for education, housing, stability. I asked her how many women died because of that protection. She did not answer. I asked her about Naomi. Her face went pale. She told me Naomi had been warned. She told me Naomi had refused to cooperate. I asked her what happens to people who refuse. Her silence was heavy. I stood up and told her I was done being quiet. She reached for my arm and said, "You do not understand what you are breaking." I told her I understood exactly. When I left her house, my phone rang. It was Naomi. Her voice was weak but steady. She said she had been taken to a private facility for evaluation. She said they were running tests without her consent. She said they were changing her medication. I asked her where she was. She said she did not know. The call cut off. I pulled over and screamed inside my car until my throat burned. By the time I reached Evelyn's house again, the sun was setting. Smoke rose in the distance. Sirens followed. My heart dropped when I realized the direction. It was coming from the clinic. By the time we arrived, flames were tearing through the building. Fire trucks lined the street. People stood watching like it was entertainment. The basement. The records. I knew then they were erasing the past in real time. And Naomi was still inside their system. The clinic burned through the night. By morning, nothing was left but wet ash and twisted metal. The official statement came fast. Electrical fault. Old wiring. Tragic but unavoidable. I stood with the crowd and listened to the lies settle into place. Evelyn squeezed my hand. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The evidence we had gathered felt suddenly fragile. Photos on my phone. Copies on Evelyn's laptop. Digital things could disappear just as easily as paper if someone wanted them gone. I drove home and locked myself inside. I closed every curtain. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall until my breathing slowed. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. This time I answered. A man spoke calmly. His voice was smooth, trained. He said his name was Daniel Price. He said he represented the foundation. He told me he understood my concerns. He told me he admired my passion for family. He said the program was never meant to cause harm. I asked him how many women died. He said outcomes were complicated. I asked him about Naomi. He paused. He said Naomi was receiving advanced care and would be released once stabilized. I asked him why the clinic burned. He said accidents happen. Then he changed his tone. He told me the real reason they had been patient with me was not my age or my history. It was my value. He said my family line showed exceptional longevity potential. He said the data was rare. He said it was profitable. That word landed hard. I asked him how much Ruthie had been paid. He gave me a number. I almost laughed. Almost. He said the agreement included financial protection for participating families, housing support, education grants, emergency funds. I realized then that this was never about science alone. This was business. Our bodies were investments. Our silence was part of the contract. He offered me a choice. Continue cooperation and Naomi would return home. Safely. Quietly. Refuse and consequences would follow. He did not threaten me directly. He did not have to. When the call ended, my hands were steady. That surprised me. Fear had been replaced by something stronger. Resolve. I called Evelyn. I told her everything. She said, then we go public. I knew she was right. If they wanted silence, I would give them noise. I started making calls. Old contacts. Journalists who once covered local corruption. Activists who understood systems like this. First, they listened politely. Then they saw the documents. Then they heard Naomi's voice messages. By evening, emails were flying. Calls were coming in. The foundation could not stop it all. The story was too big. And they knew it. The town hall smelled like polish and old paper. A fundraiser was scheduled that night. One of those quiet events where money moved hands behind smiles. The foundation was hosting it. Most of Briar Hollow's leaders would be there. I walked in wearing my best dress. Simple. Black. The kind of outfit people underestimate. Evelyn sat in the back with her phone ready. I did not wait for an invitation. When Daniel Price stepped onto the small stage to speak about community health, I stood up. My voice was clear. I said my name. I said my age. I said my family had been part of their program for more than 40 years without informed consent. The room shifted. People whispered. Daniel tried to smile. He tried to take control. Kept talking. I talked about the women who died. I talked about the clinic records. I talked about Naomi. I held up my phone and played her message. Her voice filled the room. The silence afterward was not empty. It was heavy. Someone started recording. Daniel told me to stop. I did not. Police moved toward me. Cameras moved faster. I said the foundation had treated black families as assets. I said our lives were numbers on a spreadsheet. I said we deserved the truth. Daniel tried to speak again. Then someone shouted. Then another. The room erupted. I felt hands on my arms. I felt myself being guided away. But it was too late. The story was already alive. The days after the fundraiser moved fast. Too fast. News vans came to Briar Hollow. Federal investigators followed. The foundation offices closed within a week. Names started appearing on screens. Arrests were announced quietly at first, then loudly. Daniel Price disappeared. Ruthie stopped answering my calls. Naomi came home 3 days later. She looked thinner. Her eyes were tired. But she was alive. When I hugged her, she held on like she was afraid I would vanish. She told me about the facility. White walls. Locked doors. Medication changes without explanation. Doctors who spoke kindly but never answered questions. She said they had planned to keep her longer. Until the story broke. I stayed with her every night until she slept without shaking. The town pretended nothing had happened. Doors opened. Church bells rang. Life continued. But something had shifted. People avoided my eyes. Others nodded at me with something like respect. Ruthie finally came to see me. She looked smaller, older. Her strength had always come from control, and now that control was gone. She told me she thought she had protected us. I told her protection without truth is not protection. She did not ask for forgiveness. I did not offer it. Some wounds are not meant to close neatly. Packed my things. I sold the house. I left Briar Hollow at dawn. Naomi came with me. Evelyn waved from her porch, eyes wet, smiling. The road stretched ahead, quiet and open. For the first time in a long time, my chest did not hurt. We drove until the town signs disappeared and the roads widened. Naomi slept in the passenger seat, her head tilted toward the window. I kept my hands steady on the wheel and focused on the road ahead. I did not know where we were going yet, only that we were not going back. We stopped at a small motel just before sunrise. Nothing fancy. Clean sheets. Strong coffee. That was enough. Naomi woke up slowly. She did not rush. She did not ask questions. She looked calmer than she had in years. Over breakfast, she told me she wanted to study public health. She said she wanted to understand how systems like the one in Briar Hollow were allowed to exist. I told her she would be good at it. My phone buzzed with messages. Journalists, lawyers, families from other towns who recognized the patterns I described. The story was no longer just ours. I stepped outside and breathed in the morning air. Felt lighter. I thought about my mother. About all the women who never got to leave. About the years I spent believing silence was the same as peace. I reached into my wallet and touched the folded note from the clinic. Run from your family. I understood it differently now. It was not about running away from blood. It was about running toward truth. I got into the car again. Naomi smiled at me as I started the engine. The road waited. This story teaches that silence can be inherited, but so can courage. When people are taught to stay quiet for the sake of family, community, or comfort, injustice can survive for generations. Blind trust in authority, even when it wears a friendly face, can be dangerous. Real protection comes from truth, transparency, and the willingness to ask difficult questions. Age does not limit bravery, and speaking out is never too late. One voice, when it refuses to stay quiet, can break a system that depends on secrecy. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, places, organizations, and events are imaginary and created for storytelling purposes. Although the story is written to feel real and grounded, it is not based on real people or actual events. The purpose of this story is to deliver a moral lesson and raise awareness through narrative. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story from beginning to end. If you found the story meaningful, share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you will not miss future stories like this.